Hey, audio lover, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. And today I want to make the case for you using as few plugins as possible when you mix. Now, if you're new to mixing, plugins are simply your EQs, compressors, reverbs, delays, all the things that you're inserting, the effects that you're adding to your tracks once they're recorded to enhance them and to present them to the listener in a final mix. Now, there's two huge reasons why I think you should be using as few plugins as possible. And the preface and caveat here is my job is to help you make better sounding recordings and mixes. So anything I share, it's to help you. If I'm not helping you, then these videos are pointless. I want my students to do well. I want my students to see improvement. I want my students to be happy with their results. That helps me spread this message farther. So keep in mind, I'm trying to help you. Now, the reality is, when you get into mixing, especially these days because mixing is digital and we have access to great sounding plugins, you buy a DAW, heck, you use a free piece of software. I've been doing mixes with Pro Tools First, which is a free piece of software. That comes with lots of plugins that sound great and are easy to use. You can go crazy with effects because they're digital, so you can have as many versions of them inserted in your tracks as long as your computer can handle it. The temptation is to cover up our weak recordings, are not well mic'd up recordings, or not well arranged recordings, or not well performed recordings, cover them up with tons and tons of processing in hopes of turning our crap into something amazing. Now, that's just the reality of a lot of home recording. Not because you aren't talented, although that could be the reality, but you'll find that out sooner enough if you have honest friends and family. But it's because you don't know what you're doing yet when you get into recording. I didn't know what I was doing when I started recording. That's why our recordings and mixes don't sound good. We don't know what we're doing yet. It is a brand new craft we have to learn. So we get better at recording. Our recordings sound better. Mixing becomes easier. We shouldn't have to use as many plugins. The problem, though, is even if we have good recordings, we can become insecure when we mix. And so what we do to compensate for insecurities of whether is the mix good enough, is it done, am I doing enough, what would a professional do, I don't know what I should be doing, we just add more processing. We just continue to put plugins on our tracks. That's kind of the default. Not everybody does this. Most people I see do this. So I want to make the case for you to actually do the opposite, to use as few plugins as possible. And there's two reasons. Number one is technical, and number two is psychological. Number one, technically speaking, the more plugins you add, the more processing and math your computer's having to do, the more you are destroying or at least affecting your audio. So if you record a great sounding vocal performance, good vocalist, good microphone, good room, good performance on a good day, you should have a great sounding recording. If you process it with EQ or compression or reverb or whatever, you can enhance that recording. And because DAWs are really good these days, the math is really good, the engines are really good, the plugins are really good, it'll sound great. You can't really hurt your audio. But every time you're adding a plugin, you are creating more math for the computer to do. More math means it's having to think harder. More math means it could choke. More math could mean that it affects the actual audio processing or doesn't keep the quality or the fidelity of the audio as pristine as it could be. Now, this might just be anecdotal. There may be math that proves me wrong, but it makes sense to me that the more processing you add, the more you're getting away from the raw, high fidelity version of the track, especially if you do improper processing. But I'm going to assume you know what you're doing and assume you're just adding subtle, nice processing. I think the more you add, the further away you get from the original pristine recording. So on a technical side of things, you want to keep as much quality as possible. And I think adding more plugins is only going to move you away from quality, not bring you to quality. Now, what I think is more important than just the technical side of things of keeping the computer doing too much math and having some signal degradation is the psychological benefit of using as few plugins as possible. If you tell yourself, I'm going to try to use as few plugins as possible, what that means is it stops you in your tracks when you're about to grab a plugin and makes you ask yourself one simple question. Why am I going to put this plugin on this track? What is this going to accomplish? What is the purpose of this plugin? And if you don't have a good reason, then that was a very helpful exercise because it just stopped you from processing for no reason. Maybe there is a good reason, but you just don't know what it is yet. Maybe you should EQ that track again, or maybe you should put some tape saturation on that track. But if you don't know why, then that question of should I use as few plugins as possible stops you in your tracks to say, why am I using this plugin? Because I don't want to use as many as possible. I want to use as few as possible. What is this going to accomplish? It forces you to find out what it will accomplish. It forces you to have a reason for the mix decisions you make, which is so valuable. Even if you end up using the same amount of plugins, if you have a mantra of use as few plugins as needed in the back of your mind, because Graham's beating it into your brain, then it will at the very least cause you to stop and think about why you are going to insert that plugin into that track, which is a huge win because that will make you intentional. That will educate you in the moment. So you're not just throwing on a plugin saying, oh, I don't really know why I put that there. I guess it sounds cool. It forces you to say, does this actually sound cool? Does it help or not? Why does it help? What was the problem with the track that made me come to this decision of using this plugin? What was it solving? All of that helps you become more intentional, more educated, and a better mixer down the road. Even if you decide to say, yes, I'm going to use that plugin, it was a helpful psychological exercise. Now look, plugins are so important. I love plugins. They help me make my tracks sound better. And it's amazing that you already have all the plugins you need in your DAW. I've talked about this for years. If you have EQs, that is your number one tool. If you have compressors, that's your number two tool. Beyond that, reverbs and delays are very helpful. Saturation plugins are helpful. You already have these things in your DAW, and I'm a fan of using them, so I don't want you to be afraid to mix. I don't want you to mix with a fear, or I don't want you to be a timid mixer. I want you to be confident. But having this mantra of I want to use as few plugins as possible is wisdom. It's wisdom because it makes you an intentional mixer and you do as little as possible. You don't harm your audio. You don't overprocess your audio. You don't tax your computer. You just think strategically about what do you need to do, and then you grab those tools and you use them. That's all I want you to consider when you mix. Do yourself a favor. Get a sticky note. Write down with a Sharpie or whatever. Use as few plugins as possible. Tape it to your computer screen, put it on your desk, make it your screensaver. You can even quote Graham if you want to. I didn't invent this concept, but I'm the one beating it into your brain because I'm a weirdo that's trying to help you. If you think like this, I promise you, you will become and develop into a more intentional mixer that has the courage to make as good of a mix as possible with as few tweaks as possible, which I think is a noble goal. Now, I want to leave you with something that might help you on a practical level beyond this discussion today. I mentioned a second ago that you already have all the plugins you need to make a great mix, okay? The number one plugin that you need to mix is EQ. Beyond your volume fader and pan knob, those are your most important tools to start with. Your EQ plugin is the most powerful tool you have because it creates clarity, space for your tracks to sit. It shapes the tone of your mix. It is, I think, the most powerful tool you have. Now, an EQ is a simple tool to understand. I think people understand more bass, more treble, more mids, or less of those. But people misuse it, overdo it, underdo it, don't know how to think about it strategically. So the opposite is true. If you know how to use EQ strategically, you can radically transform your mixes, as simple of a tool as it is. So what I've done is put together a helpful guide for you on EQ. It's called my EQ checklist. It's got 7 steps, 7 things to think about with EQ. This is the way I view EQ when I sit down to mix. And what it does is walks you through step 1, step 2, step 3, so you understand how to use EQ strategically. If you can get EQ right, the rest of the mix really will come together a lot faster, no matter how you like to mix, no matter what kind of genre you're in, because EQ is the number one plugin at your disposal. So what I want you to do is get your free download. Just go to eqchecklist.com. I'll put the link right here in the video and in the description. It's a simple PDF, 1 or 2 page. You can print it up, put it on your computer right next to your sticky note, use as few plugins as possible, or you can just have it on your phone or tablet or whatever. So when you're mixing, you're grabbing an EQ, you're thinking, okay, what am I doing with this EQ? You can just look through the checklist. It's like a little cheat sheet and you'll be good to go. So check it out at eqchecklist.com. Man, if you can do a whole mix with just some EQ, some volume and some pan, you're a hero in my book. Subscribe to the videos if this was helpful for you. Leave me a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'll see you on another video real soon.